let's continue where we left off in our previous class. And again, welcome to each and all. I know we have people from everywhere here joining us. It's really heartwarming to see you all, or to hear you all. But we'll continue here. We were in...
Yes. Page 87, Rabbi, page 87, we were about to start the second paragraph with, and just as all of the worlds.
Okay, thank you. So page 87, in these books right here, some of you I know have orange editions and some other editions. In these books right here, it's page 87, right at the top of the page, and it starts with the word, and just as all of the worlds are reflected. If you have another edition, maybe you can announce the page in your specific edition for everyone else to know if they also share the same edition. Sharon, I see you have, yes, what page would it be in that, in the orange book? Well, no, Deborah.
116.
Thank you, 116.
On the top, and just as
in
all
the orange
are
book.
reflected. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 87 in these books, 116 in the orange books. All right. So I'm going to we're going to stay with the same format. I'm going to ask anyone who wants to read to lead us with the reading, again, starting with the words, and just as all of the worlds are reflected. Just maybe an overview of what we've been studying. So this chapter, the human image, is all about the constant human struggle that we feel almost at every moment of the day, in which we are already pulled by two forces. There is a divine force and there's the animalistic force in us. We mentioned last time that the quote of the Talmud, that we are a combination, each and every human being is a combination of an ape and an angel. And it's really a choice that we have to make time and time again throughout the day. Are we going to behave and act angelically? Or are we going to behave, God forbid, animalistically, with impulse and instinct and without much control and thinking? That's the big question. Now, this chapter right here in the 13 Petalled Rose, and that's the brilliance of Rabbi Steinsaltz, reminds us that we are already wired to be angels, not to be animalistic. We are, as we put it, spiritual beings in a human experience, not human beings in a spiritual experience. We are at the very essence of the human condition. We are spiritual beings. And because it's at our very core, we should find it easier maybe to become in tune with that core and to be angelic, to act angelically. I think that's why, by the way, I mean, just to put this in the most practical sense, I think that's why when you do a good deed, I'm sure it's true here for everyone, but when you do a good deed, say you just gave tzedakah, you just gave charity, it feels good. Why does it feel good? And conversely, by the way, when you do something bad, it feels terrible. You feel a little shame. Why? Because again, we are wired as spiritual beings. And when we do a spiritual act of goodness and of kindness, it resonates with our deepest core. When we don't do an act like that, it conflicts with our deepest core, and that creates that pain, that shame. Now, of course, if you do a deed repeatedly, then you lose that connection with your deepest core. And if you do a bad deed, of course, repeatedly. If you do a good deed repeatedly, then it just enhances that connection with your deepest core. And in a way, your holiness, your concealed holiness, is more and more revealed, and you live on a different sphere, on a different level of consciousness, so to speak. You live really as you truly are in essence as a spiritual being. But that's really what this chapter is all about. He's been speaking about how God's creation, all of the four worlds also, are in a way channeled. The entire creation is channeled towards us, towards the purpose of every human being to connect to that spiritual core and do spiritual actions, do good, act divinely. The whole world, the whole creation of God is waiting for us to do that action, that good action. Because when we do it, what we're actually doing is that we're completing God's creation. It's almost as if God had created the world 80% complete, and it's up to us to do that at 20%, to act divinely and then complete the 100% of God's creation. So each time we are doing something good, we are not just enhancing our own self, our own very core, but what we're actually doing is that we're completing God's creation. I think that's why, if you think about this, the word for good deed in Hebrew is mitzvah, but mitzvah does not just mean good deed. That's a false translation. Mitzvah comes from the word sevet, which means a partnership. Because when we are doing a good deed, we're partnering with God in His creation. We're completing that 20% that it needs to be completed by us. And again, the entire creation, all the angels, all the worlds, every atom of God's creation awaits for the human being to continue this creation so that eventually the world can become 100% completely divine. That's really the big idea that he's introduced here in the human image in this chapter of Rabbi Steinsaltz's book. Of course, it's an idea that he introduced, but it's based on the Zohar and many other Kabbalistic sources. With in mind, let's continue here with, and just as all of the worlds are reflected. Does anyone want to read? Anyone? You can, if you do, please unmute yourself. All you have to do is unmute yourself.
Joyce, I think, would like to read, right?
Okay, yeah.
Great.
There you go. Thank you,
Hi.
Joyce. Go for it. Hi.
I'm Joyce.
Hello.
Hi, Joyce.
Okay.
Hello to everyone. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Gila. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Joyce.
And just as all of the worlds are reflected to some extent in this physical world in which we live, so too an even greater extent, indeed, in principle up to the utmost heights of divine revelation, is the inner image of the worlds reflected in the image of man. To be sure, all the creatures in the world, the great and the small, constitute copies and symbols of aspects in the existences of higher worlds. But in man, there is also reflected the relationships among various aspects of existence. Thus, man is, on the other hand, a part of the general creation of the world, and on the other hand, as the possessor of the special attribute of free will. He is the unique, concrete expression of divine reality in the worlds. For all the other worlds are ordered according to the fixed laws of cause and effect, whether of a physical or a non-physical nature. Only man can willfully change the framework somewhat and activate the vicious circles in various ways.
Right. So this is a very powerful idea, and it's based really on a verse in the Tanakh. I think it's in the book of Proverbs that says that Olam natan belibam, which means, and the world He planted in our hearts. God planted the entire world in our hearts. Now, what does this mean? What this really means is that God wanted us to connect to the world, to impact the world, and therefore He planted the world in us. To use just an analogy, maybe not such a good one, but in order to I don't know, to be a good CEO, say, of a business, or even just to be a good parent in your own family unit, or to be an influencer in whatever social circle you may find yourself, you need, first and foremost, the first tool you need, even before the tool of leadership, even before the tool of executing strategies, what you need is the understanding, the connection to the person that you are trying to influence, whether it's your child, whether it's your student. You need some type of connection. If the student, if your child, if your employee does not connect to you, if you can't connect to them, there's no way you can lead them. You have to be able to connect to them on the deepest level. You have to know how to fully understand them, understand their strengths, understand their weaknesses, and then lead them according to that. That's why, by the way, when Moses was about to die, he begged God, in the portion, by the way, of Pinchas, you'll find that verse, but it says Moses was pleading God, please do not let the congregation of Israel be like sheep who do not have a shepherd. And God heeded Moses' call. He said, fine, I'll find them a shepherd. You will be gone soon, but I'll replace you with a leader that only needs to have one quality, really one quality. That's the only quality in God's job description of a leader. What is it? The man whose spirit of God is in him. What does that mean? Spirit of God. And Rashi immediately explains. It's brilliant. Rashi explained that it's a man that can speak to rucho shel kol echad ve'echad, to the spirit in each and every human being. If you can connect to the spirit of the human being, then you can lead them. If you can't connect, if you don't have that connection, that bond, you can't lead people. It's just impossible. I know many of you know that as your own lead, as leaders in your own spheres, in your own networks. It's impossible to lead if you don't have that inner connection with people, and each in their own way, of course. But in any case, and that's why God planted a world in us, in our hearts, et ha'olam natan belibam, as we mentioned. Why did God do that? Why did God do what Rabbi Steinsaltz is describing here so beautifully? So that we can lead the world afterwards. If we can't connect to the world, if we don't have it in us, if we don't have that connection, we really can't lead it. We can't make an impact on it. And therefore, God ensured that the creation of the human being encapsulates the entire world, every sphere of the world, so that thereafter the human being can go and impact every sphere of the world. Because again, without that connection, it's impossible to lead. I think that's the big idea. I'm just reminded of, and it's a story I may have shared, but it's a story that appears in the Reshimot. It's actually these books right here, if you can see that. But these books are really a compilation of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's handwritten diaries that were found after his death in 1994, 1995. They found them in his drawer. He had kept them, never published them, but these were diaries of talks that he gave in Europe when he went to the University of Berlin and to the University of Sorbonne in Paris. And these were talks that he gave in all sorts of different settings, at bar mitzvahs, weddings, different places, or just personal notes that he wrote for himself. And he tells there a story about his, I believe his grandfather or something like that. When he was a child, he was playing this game with his brother, with his older brother, where he asked his older brother to be the rabbi and he would be the student. And they dressed up as such. And then the young student went to the very young rabbi. They must have been maybe 8, 9 years old then. And the student went to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, the 9-year-old rabbi again, or maybe younger even. He said to him, I need to ask you for a little favor, because yesterday I sinned. I forgot to do something, or whatever that sin was. Can you tell me how I can rectify this sin? And the young rabbi, the 9-year-old rabbi, immediately gave him a response. Then the student told the young rabbi, you're a fake rabbi. And the 9-year-old rabbi says, why are you calling me a fake rabbi? And the young student, this 8-year-old student, told the 9-year-old rabbi, you're a fake rabbi because a real rabbi would have sighed before giving me an answer. You didn't sigh. You didn't feel my pain. So you're a fake rabbi. But in a way, I think that reflects well the type of connection we ought to have with people, with everyone in the world. Now that also explains yet another idea. And that is that this is why Rabbi Nachman of Breslev has a quote like this, that the greater you are, or the more righteous you are, the bigger you are as a tzaddik, as a righteous man, the more you can connect to the lowliest man, even to the lowliest spheres of the world. Why? Because if you are so great, that means you have that complete connection with the world that was planted in you, with every sphere of it. And therefore, you can even connect to the lowliest part of the world. The smaller you are, the less you can connect to the world, to people. The bigger you are, the more you have that inherent connection with every aspect of the world. I'll share with you the story I've shared maybe before with the author of our book here, Rabbi Steinsaltz himself. But I remember visiting him many times in New York, and it's fascinating as I think about it. But you know, I would walk with him, I would escort him everywhere. And one day I was walking with him through Times Square. And some of you may know the story. And if you've been to Times Square, you know this. In Times Square today is completely empty. But if you've been to Times Square anywhere up until a few weeks ago, you know that Times Square might not be the cleanest square in the world. You have people giving out all sorts of flyers that are quite immodest. And I'm walking Rabbi Steinsaltz through Times Square, and these people are giving him with no shame all these flyers. And Rabbi Steinsaltz takes them, one after the other, business cards, flyers, brochures, everything. And soon enough, he had amassed this huge pile. And I'm asking Rabbi Steinsaltz, whoa, why are you taking these flyers? You don't need them. And Rabbi Steinsaltz responded, you're right, I don't need them. But the people who gave them to me need me to take these flyers from them. Why? Because they probably on a salary that is only given to them after they've gotten rid of all of their flyers. So the quicker they can get rid of them, the quicker they'll have a salary and the quicker they can have lunch that day. So why not help a stranger have his lunch a little sooner? And I thought, again, I'm astounded as I'm telling the story, because here is a man who's really, I mean, a once in a millennium scholar according to Time magazine, but I don't need the Time magazine to tell me that, with a brilliant mind, one of the great leaders of the Jewish people, not just in this generation, I believe, in all of history, whose mind is supposed to be completely elsewhere, right? And some heavenly sphere. Yet he's so connected to that world that is planted in each and every one of us that he can connect even to the people giving out flyers with the most immodest images. I thought that was the epitome of a truly great man. The greater you are, the more you can connect to the world. The smaller you are, the less you can connect to the world. And by the way, I'll let you do your homework. When you hear, especially in our atmosphere of today, when you hear all of these quote unquote leaders who seem to be completely disconnected from our world because they blame this and they blame that for this pandemic, then in my eyes, they're not great leaders. They can't connect. They seem to be completely blind. But again, the more you are great, the more you can connect in the most positive way, the more you can make an impact even on the lowliest spheres of the world. But that's the idea, and that again is why God planted this world in every one of us. In other words, every one of us is capable of connecting to the lowliest spheres of the world in the most divine way, like Rabbi Steinsaltz at Times Square. But we first have to be in tune with ourselves. We have to be in tune with our purpose. We have to be in tune with our soul. And the more in tune we are, the more then we can make that impact, because it's already there from the moment of creation. By the way, I don't want this to be a monologue. Like, I've never wanted our classes to be a monologue. So I do encourage everyone here to ask any questions. If you have a question, feel free to jump in. You can unmute yourself and jump in. So then this can be real study, real learning.
Rabbi, it's Gila. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I apologize to everyone.
No problem. Please, Gila.
I'm technically handicapped. I'll try better for next time.
No, it's all right.
The thought that I had as you were speaking, when you were talking about how doing a mitzvah makes us feel good and how doing something bad makes us feel bad, and why there's reinforcement. If we, for example, if you look at addiction, you do something over and over and over again, and then your body and your mind just wants to keep doing it.
Right.
Clearly, as you were saying with regard to mitzvot, the amazing thing, that one of the many, many amazing things that Hashem has done in the creation of the human, he's given us a certain kind of brain. And in that brain, there are many parts. And in the different parts of the brain, we can actually learn to enhance the good parts and to stifle and eliminate some of the negativity and some, if you call it, bad parts. So not only did Hashem give us the Torah, not only did he give us the teachings, but he actually gave us a brain that he created for us so that we can learn about it through science as much as we can, and that we can apply many principles that will be useful in eliminating addictions, dealing with depression, anxiety, all these things, and they can be found in the various parts of the brain. So right. The incredible genius, clearly, of Hashem is that he gave us this opportunity and the tools to use them.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Gila. I think it's brilliant, and you remind me of yet another thought going in that direction, because it's all connected, obviously. But I would encourage everyone to watch this TED Talk on addiction by a Norwegian guy, I think. I forget his name. It's really a brilliant talk. And there he concludes the talk by saying that most people think that the opposite of addiction is sobriety, right? That's what most people would say. That's probably what I would say too. But he challenges people to think differently, that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. People who fall into addictions, it's because they've lost that ability to connect, whether it's their fault or not. But they are not able to connect, not to human beings, and not to their deeper self. But, and therefore, I don't know if you would agree with that, Gila, as a psychologist yourself, but it's a powerful thought, and it connects to everything we're saying here that Rabbi Steinsaltz is teaching. And that is that the more connected you are to people, to the world, but also to yourself, because in yourself you'll find all these people and the world, then the less you can fall into those bad parts of the brain, like you were talking about, those addictions, the more you are in tune with your divine self.
Yes, Rabbi Allouche, just to add one quick comment, and that is that loneliness, alienation, isolation, fear, and lack of connection clearly are one of the major drivers towards addiction. So that's absolutely, from my perspective, correct. So it's the connection and the connectivity to people, to community, to family, to anyone, to oneself. That is one of the great forces to work with addiction.
Right. Beautiful. Very good.
Rabbi, this is Jacob. I have a comment to talk about. There is a concept in medicine that called tolerance, which means that when you use a medication over and over again, its effects diminishes, and therefore you need to use more medication to get that effect. Now, if we apply that spiritually, we can say that with the brain changes, when you apply your behavior negatively, then you're creating a certain brain pathway that is so injected or activated. It becomes you lose your emotions, and you can have bad behavior. But perhaps with doing a mitzvah, it's actually the opposite. Right. It goes against science, or maybe I can say that. I don't know if it's, I haven't done any experiments, but I'm assuming that the more mitzvahs you do, right, the higher you get. It's the opposite effect as the more cocaine you take, the more you need to satisfy yourself. Whereas spiritually, perhaps it's at a different level that it actually alimenté. I don't know how to say that in English, but I'm lucky you understand.
No. Okay. Yes. It augments itself. Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if there is a connection from a Kabbalistic perspective. Is there a way that could explain this, this cycle that strengthens the mitzvah, whereas you in the physical world, the more you if you bring flowers every day to your wife every day, at one point, okay, I'm getting flowers today, big deal. But perhaps the mitzvah has the opposite effect. I don't know if there is a mechanism that explains that spiritually.
So it's an excellent question, or an excellent point. But I would say this: you're right. First of all, there's this idea, and it's brilliant because again, it's very much connected to what we're saying. There's this idea from the ethics of our fathers that says as follows: mitzvah goreret mitzvah, va'avera goreret avera. The mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, and a sin leads to another sin. Once you start doing mitzvah repeatedly, you get into that routine of doing mitzvot, and you become sort of a mitzvah person. Once you start doing sin, God forbid, then repeatedly, and then you get into that sin routine, and it's harder and harder to jump out of it if it's a repetitive act that you do time and time again, if it's become so part of your lifestyle. So it's true for mitzvahs, and you're right that mitzvahs can become dull. If you, like you said, if you bring flowers to your wife each and every day, then it's no big deal after a while. But we have to also remember that beyond the idea that we have to do these mitzvahs repetitively so that we can become mitzvah persons ourselves, because deeds do make us, they do mar us, as Victor Hugo says, by the way, but so many others also. Deeds make us who we are. But there's also this big idea in Judaism that is found in so many places, that today, like my grandfather would say, today must be better than yesterday, but much less than tomorrow. Every day we have to grow. So bringing flowers to your wife each and every day is a good deed. But if you haven't grown in those actions, maybe today you can bring a $10 bouquet, but tomorrow it's going to be a $30 bouquet. And maybe after you've reached a $100 bouquet, maybe switch to jewelry. And then maybe after that. So I'm saying you can grow into those mitzvot. You can't stay, at the same exact time. And that's really what creates that growth. Not just the repetition, but the enhancement after each and every repetition. That's what I think also can save a person from dullness, from boredom, and from being almost robotic. So that's to address your point. Thank you, Jacob.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Can I just add one quick thing to what was being said?
Yeah.
There was also a wonderful scientist, Candace Pert, and she found that not only is memory in the brain, but memory is in every single cell and molecule of our body. This is science.
Right.
And it's really going along with everything you're saying about Hashem, and that what Gila said, and what's being said is that this is not just, it's here, but in our brain, but that brain it's within all memory. So when we do something good and we have that good feeling, our memory cells within our whole body, we say we vibrate, we are excited, we're vibrating. Well, we really are. And so it goes along with what all these teachings are saying in so many ways.
Right. No,
so thank you.
So Rabbi, I've got a question. This is Vicki Broman.
Yes.
So a lot of times,
but now not anymore.
Pardon?
I saw your face earlier, not anymore.
I know, I turned it off. I realized that my house
no
is the
problem.
messiest out of everybody else's, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's my thought. A lot of times you do a good deed, a mitzvah, and it feels really good, and then you do it over and over and over. But what ends up happening is that the addiction becomes people looking at you in a positive way and saying, oh, you're such a good person. And after a while, it becomes a negative because that's what you're going after rather than the good deed.
Right.
So there's kind of a fine line. I know I found that when I was doing crisis counseling. I mean, I was volunteering for 10 years, and I realized that after a while I became numb to the mitzvah, but
Right.
I became addicted to the comments that were being made, oh, it's so hard or whatever, and I had to take a step back and make
Right.
sure that I was doing it for the right reasons. So,
Right.
if you're giving flowers to your wife because you want something in return, then that's something different, or because you're apologizing, then that's something different, especially, although I did like the idea of working it up to jewelry and stuff. I have talked to my husband about that. But I just need to say that it's very good feeling to do good things, but it's not for you that you're doing it, it's for other people. So if your high or your vibration, whatever, is because you want that feedback all the time, that turns around to a negative as well.
Right. So I'm going to give you, that's excellent. That's an excellent point. So I'll give you two opposite points to think about. One point is a point actually comes directly from Rabbi Steinsaltz. I remember that years ago when I was still living in Atlanta, I gave a lecture and many people attended and I got some good feedback from it. And then I went to Rabbi Steinsaltz and I said, I feel like this is feeding my ego. Maybe I should stop. and which is right what you were saying, Vicky. And Rabbi Steinsaltz said to me, "Why stop?" I said, "Because it's swelling my ego." He said, "Why are you thinking just about yourself? How about the people that are listening to your ideas and are implementing them?" And then he gave me the example of, so if you feel good about giving tzedakah, should you stop giving tzedakah? How about the poor man who needs your tzedakah? Who cares about you and your feelings? The actions, if they have an impact, a good impact, if they can feed someone who needs food, then continue doing them. Who cares about the ego? That's one side of the coin. And there's great wisdom to that too. The other side of the coin is that the ego absolutely needs to be controlled, because if it continues to grow, it can eventually even transform you in the most negative way, to the point that you'll stop doing those good actions, or that you'll distort them and they won't come out as good. And for that, I will quote Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa. It's one of my favorite quotes and ideas. But Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa once turned to his students and he said to them, "I need you to go and write down in two separate notes, two separate pieces of paper, two quotes from the Torah. On one quote, on paper, I want you to write the quote that Abraham said about himself, Va'anochi afar va'efer, I am but dust and ashes. On the other piece of paper, I want you to write a Mishnah from the Ethics of Our Fathers that says as follows, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And I said to them, when you are feeling down and you're feeling completely useless, then take out the quote that says that the world was created for me. In other words, the world is waiting for you to act and fulfill your purpose. When you're feeling a little too egotistic and you're feeling that that ego is indeed getting to yourself, take out the quote that says, Va'anochi afar va'efer, I am but dust and ashes. So it's that balance that one has to find. On the one hand, if we're doing good, we can't let our ego stop us, our control of our ego stop us. On the other hand, we also let our ego run wild, and we have to tone it down by reminding ourselves that we are but dust and ashes. But I think it's a constant, just like the fight, and the ballistic soul and the divine soul is a constant fight. So too, this is a constant, and we have to be honest with ourselves. And if we are feeling that our ego is getting the better of us, then let's practice self-nullification in a way, and remind ourselves that we are but dust and ashes.
Maybe that's why the rabbi always pauses before they speak.
Maybe, that's good. That's right.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yes, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And I hope whatever is wrong with your neck gets well quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a little car accident, but I'm getting much better. Thank God.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you. I'll recover, so no worries.
There's a wonderful book by Isaac Bashevis Singer called Shadows on the Hudson. Mm-hmm. And it deals with a guy who was, as a child, a once in 500-year Talmudic scholar. And everyone thought he was going to become a Gaon. Mm-hmm. And after the Holocaust, he lost all of his faith. And he goes to the United States, and all of these people live in New York, and in fact, they are all shadows on the Hudson. They're shadows of their former selves, because most of them have lost their faith, and they've also, not just their faith, but their practice of Judaism.
Right.
So this fellow has a wife whom he cheats on. He has a mistress. He begins cheating on the mistress with a young girl who was a student of his when he was a rabbinical teacher, and she was 15 and he was 30. And he begins cheating on the mistress with her. He runs off, leaves his wife, leaves his mistress, thinks he's found true love, winds up being totally bored with her, comes back to the mistress. Everything is empty for him. And at the end, he's made a lot of money, but his life is torture.
Right.
And at the end, he winds up going to Jerusalem. He winds up going to Mea Sharim, cuts off all ties with everyone except for his childhood Talmudic study partner, who says, I want to come and visit you.
Right.
And he says, I'll let you come and visit me, but on one condition. You have to follow every mitzvah there is to the letter. And as he's saying this, I know the thing because I adapted it to a play. He's putting on tefillin, and he says, because the mitzvot are the way that we bind the beast, that we bind the animal within. And if I deviate from one, I'm at such a fragile state that I'll begin unraveling all of it. And that the mitzvot are literally a way of containing the animal within, which is always there. And I thought that it's not just a matter of spiritual elevation, as it is almost a prophylaxis against Yetzer Hara.
Right, right. In a way, you're right. I mean, absolutely. You know, there's a passage in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Kiddushin, that says, "Barati lo Yetzer Hara, ubarati lo Torah tavlin." I created for the human being an evil inclination, but I also created for him a counter medicine, so to speak, and that is Torah and its commandments. You're right. So absolutely, the connection to Torah is what helps us overcome the Yetzer Hara, and that story is really stupendous. Is it, by the way, based on a true story?
No, you know, Singer is a novelist, and at the time he was writing it, he was like Dickens. He was serializing it and getting paid by the word in a Yiddish newspaper. So it's a very big book.
I see.
But it's the gist of it is, and I think that was true of Singer, that he was a very devout man who lost his faith. But became more religious in a much deeper way at the end of his life.
Right.
And saw it as a way of binding the beast.
Right. Absolutely. No, beautifully said.
Rabbi,
okay, yes.
Rabbi, this is Jolene Pelletier.
Yeah, hi, Jolene.
Hi. I just wanted to let you know, I put in the chat that the guy that did the TED Talk is Johann Hari, and I put the link to it in there, in the chat.
Yeah. I see it. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. That's right. That's the TED Talk. Thank you. That's exactly the TED Talk I was referring to, Johann Hari. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just to develop this idea a little more, I just want to repeat Rabbi Steinsaltz's words here at the very end of the paragraph that Joyce read just a short while ago. But it's that last sentence. If you look at it again, because there's a whole other idea in this sentence that I want to share here with you. But it goes like this: only man can willfully change the framework somewhat and activate the vicious circles in various ways. Willfully change that framework or the physical nature of the world itself. Now, what does this mean? What it means is that it reminds me really of this big idea, Kabbalistic idea, that every human being has been given not just a purpose, but he's part of the world to fulfill his or her purpose. What does this mean? Take the globe, the entire world, this whole planet, and divide it into 7 billion. How many people live in the world? 7 billion, 8 billion? How many? Not sure. 7 billion. So divide it into 7 billion pieces. Make a 7 billion puzzle pieces of the puzzle of the world with this globe. And every human being receives, as he comes down here on this on earth to fulfill his or her purpose, every human being receives one piece of that puzzle. It's almost as if God is saying, that's the piece of the puzzle that you have to impact in this world. If every human being does his or her job to impact his or her piece of the puzzle, the whole world will then become divine. Think about it this way. Now, of course, it's not just a geographical area. This is just more of a metaphor than anything else. But it's also a psychological area, an emotional area. It's people that fit into that piece of the puzzle. It's places, it's moments. You can take abstract time and fit into that piece of the puzzle. But everyone is given their own piece of the puzzle to influence throughout their lives. And in the word of even Jewish law, it's called Dalet Amod. We each receive 4 feet. It's amazing because it's very much connected yet to the coronavirus, because we are told that the social distancing must be for at least, must be by at least 6 feet distance from one another. It's almost like everyone is given 6 feet. It's true. That's what halacha says. Everyone's giving 6 feet. That's their 6 feet of influence throughout the world. We have to impact those 6 feet. Again, those 6 feet are multidimensional, not just geographical and physical, they're multidimensional, but we have our own portion to impact. And that's why, by the way, every one of us is really indispensable. Everyone. If we don't do our part, then a part of the world will be missing. We'll be missing some divinity. Everyone has to play their note, so to speak, has to impact their part of the world. Now, and that's why, again, Rabbi Steinsaltz, based on this, Rabbi Steinsaltz writes this sentence, that we can willfully change the framework somewhat and activate those vicious circles in various ways. How can we change the framework of the world? By changing that piece of the puzzle that we were given when we were born. If we can focus on that, on the people that are in our piece of the puzzle, on the places that we go to that are in a piece of that puzzle, on the moments that we are given each and every day, on the opportunities that we are given each and every day that are in that piece of the puzzle, we can focus on that and be purpose-oriented, then we will have elevated our piece of the puzzle, our piece of the world. And if everyone does that again, then the whole world is elevated, and that's what eventually brings that ultimate redemption. But that's really the big idea. Now, I just want to share with you yet another story, but there's a story about a Hasidic master by Deborah, I believe it was, who, like many Hasidic rabbis, would see people each and every day, and they would give blessings to people and consult people. And he would do that too, each and every day. And one day he stopped his visits for no reason. He told people, I'm sorry, I just saw this person. I have to stop my visits right in the middle. No one can see me until further notice. And someone came to this great rabbi and said, what happened? Why did you stop your visits, seeing people so abruptly? And he responded as follows. It's a very deep answer. I think it's very much connected to what we're saying here. He responded as follows. He said, when a person comes to me with a problem, the first thing I try to do is see where I myself have that problem. Someone came to me and said, I didn't give charity. I'm going to ask myself, when did I not give charity? Because that problem is reflective of what I have to fix in this world. That's why God is bringing me this problem to my attention. I just saw this person, he continued to respond by saying, I just saw this person, they came with me with a problem that I couldn't find within myself. So I had to stop all the visits until I find this problem within myself. Once I find this problem within myself, I'll be able to continue my conversation with this person and eventually continue my visit. That was the reply of this Hasidic rabbi. But in a way, it's a deep reply. It's a very powerful reply. And again, I think it reflects what a true leader is. A person is able to relate even to the lowliest of problems, like we mentioned at the beginning of the class. But it also reflects this idea that we are each given hints to the part of the puzzle that we have to fix, that we have to elevate in this world. Those hints are given to us through the people that we interact with, even if they are students, even people that look at us for inspiration and guidance. But if we can't find those pieces of those problems within us and fix them from within us first and foremost, then we won't be able to fully fix our piece of the puzzle. That's what Rabbi Steinsaltz says. And again, it connects back to this idea of this paragraph. God planted a world within each and every one of us. That world has its own deficiencies. If we can't see them, then we can't be fully connected with our world. We have to be able to see them, fix them, and then continue to the other parts of that piece of the world that we were given when we were sent to this world. That's the idea. I know it's a little deep, but I think it's very powerful. Just imagine, just to be as practical as possible also, imagine that we would teach our children, our students, we would teach people that we know that approach on life, that everything, every challenge that comes their way is there not, God forbid, to squash them, to attack them, to ridicule them, to crush them. It's quite the opposite. It's there to elevate. It's there to, because it's that piece of the puzzle that they need to fix in this world. It's there ready to make them and the world better. And it's there because God believes in them, that they can deal with that challenge, that they can elevate that challenge. Imagine we would teach that to our children, how much more self-esteem they would have, how much more purpose would they sense in their own lives. I think it's really such a powerful idea. All right. Anyone else? Otherwise, we can continue with a little more of Rabbi Steinsaltz's holy words here. Okay. Does anyone want to ask a question, share a thought, or read? Bottom of page 87 again in this edition. Therefore, man alone is the expression. Does anyone want to read?
Sure, I'll read, Rabbi. It's Gila.
Oh, thank you, Gila.
Okay, sure. Therefore, man alone is the expression of the creative will in the world. By virtue of the spark that is in his soul, man manifests the divine plenty existing in all the worlds unto their most sublime heights, so that the whole semblance of man is, in a certain sense, in the image of God, which is to say, man is both the projection of the creative divine plenty into physical reality and the divine form revealed to the higher worlds as it appears in our world.
Right. So this is again also a very profound thought. But if we were indeed, like Genesis says at the very beginning, created in the image of God, what this really means is that we have divine powers within us. We have the ability to create, and to create not just human beings, but to create, opportunities, to create kindness, to create all these good things that God also created in our world. Now, the more a person is in tune, like we said, his divine self, the more he can, in a way, become divine, become infinite. The more he can almost change the of nature. I think that's why there's this famous analytics that says Gozer v'Kadosh Baruch Hu mekayem, that a righteous person decrees, and even if it goes against the laws of nature, that which he decrees or she decrees, God has to follow suit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekayem, God has to fulfill, because a righteous person is so in tune with his divine self that he acts divinely. And when he acts divinely, God says, well, I'm there. I'm divine. You're divine. I have to fulfill that which you just decided. Maybe that explains why so many of the truly righteous people were, in a way, what we call miracle workers. They were able to change nature. I mean, I know of many people who were healed by the simple blessing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, for example, Rabbi Schneerson of blessed memory. Even though doctors said to them, you just have a few days to live, or whatever it may be. Because when they are so in tune with the divinity, they can act divinely. The finite is changed by their infinity, so to speak. And that all depends, of course, on how much in tune we are with our divine self. The more we have that divinity channeled through us, the more we can change the nature of the world, the more we can really make that impact on the world. Now, I do believe that takes a lifetime of work. It doesn't just happen, with these voodoo methods. That doesn't work. It's like we were speaking about before. They're a petition of goodness, of good deeds. They're a petition of self-refinement. And the more we do it, the more, I think, the more we have that gift, that divine gift to change the nature of the world. I will say this, that it's interesting because the people who do have it will say that they don't. The people who don't have it will often say that they do. Now, why is that? Because God is egoless. And if you're egoless, you don't know that you have it. What knows? Powers. Your ego is very aware of your powers, because your powers boost your ego. But if you're egoless, then you're not so aware of your powers, because you're divine. The divinity has no ego. I will share with you this. I'll share with you a story about Rabbi Steinsaltz. I don't know if I shared this but I was really touched by it. But Rabbi Steinsaltz's son was here a few weeks ago. Rabbi Steinsaltz's son at the age of 16 had leukemia. And these doctors in Israel told him, you have just a few months to live. Prepare for death. There's nothing we can do. And Rabbi Steinsaltz went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson in New York, gave him a blessing of healing time and time again, about 9 times, he said, altogether. As his situation was deteriorating, in spite of the blessings he had received, Rabbi Steinsaltz said, I'm going to go to this Kabbalist in Netanya, who was known as the Dayal, as the fisherman. That's how simple they were. He was a fisherman, to ask for a blessing. And Rabbi Steinsaltz was entering his room. At the second he was entering his room, the fisherman, this Kabbalist, sees Rabbi Steinsaltz and tells him, I know you came. This is without any notice by Rabbi Steinsaltz. I know you came to ask for a blessing for your son's full recovery, but don't you worry. The guy in New York, referring to Rabbi Schneerson, is already taking care of it. Now, why am I thinking of the story? Because again, they have, not just because they have the ability to really change the laws of nature, the more divine you are, the more infinite you become, like we said. But this fisherman, no one knew about it. Really, no one. I mean, it was a Kabbalist that very few people. That's because, again, you know, they have no ego. They're fishermen. But those are the people, who usually really can have it. And if they work on themselves, they certainly have it because of that humility. Anyhow, it's just an interesting note. I will say this. I mean, the end of the story, of course, is, as you know, is a happy story. But this is how many laws of nature they change. He miraculously recovered, Rabbi Steinsaltz's son, many. And once he recovered, the doctors couldn't believe it. This is miraculous. But we have to tell you, it looks like you won't be able to have children because of what you went through. And again, I asked the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and today many has, I think, 4 children. So there we go, another law of nature that was changed by these divine people. Anyhow, that's really the big idea. The more in tune you are with our divinity, the more we can connect to the lowliest part of the world, but also the more we can change those laws of nature, even the lowliest part of the world, because we become divine. And we don't become divine. We return to our divine state. And that divine state knows no boundaries. In any case, speaking of the divine, I know time is up. I do want to, together with each and every one of you and each and every one of your divinities, turn to God and ask for a full and speedy recovery first. I know Barry is here, so for Barry's wife, Hashem should bless her with a full and speedy recovery. Amen. To all those who need healing, especially in this COVID-19 era, and at the same time, shake the heavens so that God can eradicate this plague from our world, bring upon us only good health and healing, and our world, its ultimate redemption. I know it's coming. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, the Hebrew month of Nisan. Nisan means miracle, and that's also why the Exodus from Egypt, the ultimate miracle, happened in this month, and that's why the Talmud also states that the final redemption will happen in this month, the month of miracles. So we hope and pray that this is indeed the month in which all of the miracles are revealed to us, including the miracle of the ultimate redemption that should happen speedily. Amen.
Rabbi, it's
Amen.
Quick,
yes, Gila.
if you don't mind. So has anyone been able to extract any kind of thoughts from Rabbi Steinsaltz? I know he can't speak, but I'm wondering if he has the ability to communicate in any way, and is he aware of what's going on in the world now?
Yes, he's absolutely aware, and I thank you for that, Gila, and thank you for your email also the other day about that. Yes, I mean, I have myself, I've spoken to Rabbi Steinsaltz multiple times, but I will tell you, he's quarantined right now, thank God, not because he was infected with the COVID-19 or anything like that, just because he may have been exposed to it at some days ago, some bris, some circumcision, or maybe even more than 2 days ago. But he's also elderly and he's weak, so they quarantined him now for more than 2 weeks. So he's very much aware of what's happening. It's happening to himself too. I asked Rabbi Steinsaltz to come up with a statement, and from what I understood is that he said to me and to his son who was on the call, we were just speaking about almost like write something and I'll review it. So I asked son to we'll edit it, we'll run Rabbi Steinsaltz, and hopefully we'll hear from him. Unfortunately,
how is Rabbi Singer doing?
So Rabbi Zinger is the head of Rabbi Steinsaltz's high school yeshiva. He had the coronavirus, and thank God he's healed. Baruch Hashem. And he's good and healthy. But Rabbi Steinsaltz, again, because of his speech and his inability to write or to type, he's not able to come up with a statement.
Rabbi, one more thing. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
one last thing. A number of hours ago in Yerushalayim, many of you may have tuned in. There was a worldwide Tehillim fest, if you will, and there by the Kotel there were 2 psalms that were read by a rabbi at the Kotel, and they were Psalm 20 and 23. Rabbi,
right.
You know, we're going out from our screens now,
right,
back into our new reality, into the pandemic.
Yeah.
Can you give us something? Perhaps would it be useful for us to say these 2? So they're very powerful. If anyone hasn't read them or is not familiar with them, Psalm 20 and 23, they're extremely, extremely powerful psalms. Is that something we could do? Is there anything else we could do?
No, absolutely, I would agree. Psalms 20, 23, and I will add also Psalm 30 to that list. I will actually post right now on our chat to everyone a link, a great link, where you can find the whole book of Psalms, both in Hebrew and in English. So you're right, 20, 23, and 30 are great Psalms to say. I would add one more thing, maybe a little more practical. Of course, we have to pray and we have to shake the heavens with our prayer. But I think we have to also I think the message of in this coronavirus pandemic, no one understands why this is happening. I don't think anyone can understand why God does things like that. It's just beyond our finite brain. But there are messages that we can certainly draw from this. And this is affecting the entire world. And it's affecting the entire world in a way that we are distancing ourselves from each other and in a way disconnecting ourselves altogether from the world. Maybe God wants us to go inward into our families, into our relationships, deepen the connection instead of continuing the superficial connections of Facebook and the like. Mm-hmm. God wants us to have not a Facebook, like I said to someone, but just a book without the face. Don't judge a book by its cover. Create your own book of true relationships, your own stories, your own narrative. Not a narrative that is just a face, that's Facebook, but a narrative that has a real book, a real story with the relationships that you have, with the relationships maybe you ought to have, yet you don't have the courage to launch yourself into them. So I think that's another message. Reach out to people, deepen people that you know loosely, that you know quite well, and deepen those relationships. God wants us to go inward and to create books with every relationships that we have. Not Facebooks, but real books.
Thank you.
Is this going to be on Facebook, this session?
I'll have to ask my tech expert, Yaakov Kurer, Shaliach from Israel. I think so.
Okay, and next week, same time, same station?
So next week, I mean, this station is for all of our classes. By the way, I'm going to share with you right here. If you haven't been on it, you have to go on our amazing new website where you have right here, I just shared it too, cbtvirtualworld.com, where you have all of our classes, all of our prayer services, everything concentrated on one website. We'll continue this class as this is the setting every 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, if it's okay with everyone, we'll meet again at 1 p.m. Next Wednesday, everyone is welcome to our Happiness Hour at 11:30 a.m. as you'll see on the website. By the way, I will encourage you. Yesterday, we had Racheli Frankel on a call. Each and every Tuesday at 11:30 a.m., we'll have a world scholar address us during these uncertain times to give us words that are certain, words that ground us, words that anchor us and inspire us. So join us for that too. It's the same Zoom address for all of the classes. For the prayer services for our virtual synagogue, it's a different Zoom address. You're welcome to that, but you'll find it on that website. We also have our weekly sermon. We also have kids activities and kids prayers and all sorts of things. You'll see everything on that website, but please join us for all of that.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Gila. Thank you, Gila.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Thank you, Gila.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Be well.
Everybody stay well.
Thank you, Rabbi.